The rain on Vega Prime wasn't water. It was liquid light, a cascade of shimmering silver that fell without sound, painting the towering crystalline spires of the city in streaks of molten mercury. In a private observation pod hovering 500 meters above the glimmering avenues, Kalen, a human man with tired eyes and a wedding band worn thin, watched it fall. He wasn't here for the view. His gaze was locked on the access panel he'd just pried open, its gut-spilling wires that glowed like captured stars. In his hands, thrumming with a warmth that felt dangerously alive, was the item he'd been hired to steal. A memory core, its surface swirling with the stolen, sacred memories of a dead alien queen. Suddenly, the pod's serene ambiance shattered. The door hissed open, not to the serving drone he'd bribed, but to a young Velen woman. She was breathtaking, her skin possessing the faint, opalescent sheen of her species, her large, luminous eyes the color of twilight. But those eyes were wide, not with wonder, but with a terror so raw it was a physical force in the small space. She was dressed in the intricate, ceremonial silks of the Velen upper caste, now torn and smudged. Her name was Lyra, and she was supposed to be at her betrothal gala, not here, fleeing into the pod of a human stranger. "Please," she gasped, the universal translator in her throat buzzing with static. "You must hide me. He's coming." Before Kalen could speak, before he could even hide the glowing core, the world outside the panoramic window exploded. A sleek predatory skimmer, blacker than the space between stars, slammed into their pod. The universe upended. Kalen was thrown against the viewport, the memory core searing a brand into his palm. The pod screamed in protest, alarms wailing a dissonant chord as it tore free from its magnetic moorings. Spinning wildly, trailing a comet's tail of shattered glass and liquid light, they began a silent, horrifying plunge toward the radiant city below. Lyra met his eyes, and in that moment, as death rose to meet them, Kalen saw not an alien aristocrat, but a mirror of his own deepest, most ancient fear, the terror of leaving a child alone in a cold, uncaring universe. Before we continue, subscribe now so you don't miss more incredible stories like this one. Oh, and tell us in the comments where you are watching this video from. We always read every message. The fall didn't kill them. The pod's emergency grav dampeners fired at the last possible second, turning a terminal impact into a brutal, bone-jarring crash. Kalen woke to the smell of ozone, scorched metal, and the sweet, floral scent of Velen blood. He was half-pinned under a collapsed support beam, pain radiating from his ribs. The memory core was still clenched in his fist, its light now pulsing erratically. Across the wreckage, Lyra stirred. She'd been thrown into a nest of ruptured cushioning gel, which had likely saved her life. Her opalescent skin was marred by a deep gash on her temple, leaking not blood, but a luminescent sapphire eye core. She pushed herself up, her silks in tatters, and her eyes immediately scanned the ruined pod. Not for an exit, but for him. "You're alive," she said, her voice hollow with relief and shock. "For now," Kalen grunted, leveraging the beam off himself with a groan. He was a man built for quiet jobs, not crashes. At 47, his body bore the map of a harder life on Earth before he'd come to the Vega system. Old fractures, muscle built from labor, not gyms, and a permanent weariness behind his brown eyes. He tucked the memory core into the shielded inner pocket of his rugged jacket. His priority had just violently shifted from profit to survival. "Who was that?" he asked, nodding upwards toward the unseen sky where the black skimmer had retreated. "Tyrus," she whispered the name like a curse. "My betrothed, he wasn't just coming to retrieve me." She hugged herself, a very human gesture of vulnerability. "He intends to silence me permanently." Kalen didn't ask why. In his line of work, salvage, acquisition, discrete problem-solving, you learned not to ask. But the money for this job, offered by a shadowy intermediary, was a sum that could change a life. One last job, he told himself. The mantra had started 5 years ago, after the accident that took his wife, Alara, and left his daughter Maya, trapped in a cryostasis pod on a dying Earth, her body fighting a genetic time bomb he couldn't afford the cure for. The memory core was supposed to be the key. Steal it, deliver it, get the credits, and buy Maya's passage to the advanced medical facilities on Centauri Prime, a simple transaction in a complicated world. He looked at Lyra, truly looked at her. She was young, maybe early 20s and human equivalent. The Velens were elegant, long-lived. Their culture built on psychic empathy and a complex, rigid hierarchy. Her terror was palpable, but beneath it was a steely resolve that didn't match the delicate figure before him. "We can't stay here," Kalen said, his voice gravelly. "That crash will draw every enforcer in the sector. And your friend Tyrus." He helped her out of the wreckage. They emerged into a lower-level maintenance alley, a stark contrast to the radiant city above. Here the liquid light rain filtered down as a dull, gray mist dripping from corroded pipes and grimy conduits. The air hummed with the subaudible thrum of the city's immense power grid. This was the underbelly of Vega Prime, a place of service drones, illicit traders, and people like Kalen who existed in the shadows of the gleaming spires. As they moved, Lyra explained in hurried, hushed tones. Her betrothal to Tyrus, a high-ranking scion of a powerful Velen house, was a political merger. A desperate move by her own diminished family to secure standing. The gala tonight was to be the announcement. But she'd discovered something. Tyrus wasn't just ambitious. He was a purist, a member of a clandestine sect that believed Velen's psychic purity was being diluted. His plan wasn't just marriage, but to use her family's latent, strong empathic line to breed a perfected generation, eradicating what he saw as weakness. He'd confessed it to her, thinking her too docile, too trapped to object. "I am not a vessel," Lyra said, her luminescent eyes hardening. "I am not a genetic archive. I told him I would expose him to the conclave. That is when he changed. The man I knew vanished. What looked back at me was cold absolute." Kalen led her through a maze of steam vents and flickering holographic graffiti. He knew these streets. This was his habitat. As they walked, the memory core in his pocket seemed to grow heavier, warmer. He thought of Maya frozen in time, her smile preserved in a crystal-locked photo on his datapad. This girl Lyra was someone's daughter too. The parallel was a knife twist in a heart he'd tried to armor with cynicism. He found a safe house, a rented cubicle in a stacked hab, unit that smelled of stale NutriPaste and rust. As the door sealed behind them, Lyra finally broke, the adrenaline fading. She slid down the wall, drawing her knees to her chest, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The luminous tears that traced her cheeks fell to the floor, leaving tiny glowing spots on the grimy metal. Kalen stood awkwardly, the thief with the world's most volatile contraband, watching an alien princess cry in his miserable hideout. He wordlessly offered her a clean cloth from his pack. She took it, her long, slender fingers brushing his. A jolt, not electric but emotional, passed between them, a flash of profound, echoing loneliness, a grief so vast it felt oceanic. It was her empathy leaking out in her distress, and it resonated with the hollowed-out chamber of his own soul. "Why did you help me?" she asked, her voice small. "You had no reason to." Kalen looked at the frozen image of Maya on the wall screen he'd activated. "Everyone has a reason," he said, the words feeling inadequate. "Get some rest. The hunt will begin at first light." The hunt did begin. Not with daylight, Vega. Prime's artificial sun cycle was just a simulation, but with the insidious crawl of system-wide alerts. Kalen's illicit scanner picked up bulletins. A damaged human male and a high-born Velen female. Last seen in the Sterling district. Possible kidnapping. Dangerous. The image of Tyrus, handsome and severe, appeared on the bulletins, appealing for Lyra's safe return. The narrative was being woven, a tragic abduction by a desperate human criminal. They had to move. Kalen's contact, a gruff Tauran named Gore, provided false idents and passage to the Rust Belt, the orbital graveyard of ships and forgotten stations that circled Vega Prime. It was the only place to disappear long, enough to plan. On the cramped, shuddering transport freighter, surrounded by the smells of unwashed bodies and engine grease, Lyra studied Kalen. "You are not just a refugee," she stated softly. "I'm a salvager," he said, the half-truth smooth from years of use. "You carry a great sadness, and a great purpose." Her eyes, now clear and focused, seemed to look through his skin. "The object in your pocket. It sings a song of immense sorrow, a queen's lament." Kalen stiffened. "You can sense it? All Velens are empathic to a degree. My line was particularly strong. It is why Tyrus wanted it." She reached out a hand but didn't touch his coat. "It is not just data. It is a soul print. To possess it is a profound violation. Why do you have it?" The question hung in the recycled air. Kalen saw no point in lying to an empath. I was hired to retrieve it. The credits, they're for my daughter. She's sick. The cure exists, but not where we are. Lyra's expression softened with a compassion that felt undeserved. A father's love is a universal frequency, she murmured. But this core, its song is intertwined with something darker. A threat of violence. Of theft. Before Kalen could process that, the freighter lurched. A patrol scan. They hid in a filthy maintenance closet, pressed together in the dark. Kalen could feel the subtle vibration of her fear, the warmth of her strange body. He could also feel the memory core's pulse syncing with his own heartbeat. A disquieting intimacy. They made it to the Rust Belt, to a derelict survey station Kalen had used before. It was a skeletal thing, clinging to the carcass of an ancient ore hauler. Here, amidst the silent ballet of dead starships in the eternal starscape, a fragile routine developed. Kalen worked on securing a new ship, piecing together a vessel from scrap that could make the long jump to his buyer. Lyra, to his surprise, was not helpless. She had a keen intuitive understanding of systems, her empathy allowing her to sense energy flows and imbalances. She helped him rewire the navigation console, her delicate hands surprisingly steady. Nights were long in the silence of space. They talked. Lyra spoke of her world, the psychic choruses that connected families, the beauty of shared emotion, but also the stifling weight of tradition and expectation. She spoke of her love for Velen bioluminescent art, a passion Tyrus had dismissed as frivolous. Kalen, in turn, found himself speaking of Earth, not the polluted, struggling world he'd left, but the Earth of his memory. Of Alara's laugh, the way it could fill a room. Of Maya's obsession with old Earth constellations, how she'd point at the smoggy sky and trace Orion's belt with a small, determined finger. He showed Lyra the hologram. Lyra stared at the frozen image of the 8-year-old girl with wide, curious eyes. "She is beautiful," Lyra said, her own eyes glistening. "The love you hold for her. It is a tangible force. It is your anchor." She paused, then looked directly at him. "But the core you carry, Kalen, its song is changing. It is reacting to you, to your memories. I fear what your buyer truly wants with the Velen Queen's soul." New clues emerged. Kalen, using a heavily encrypted channel, dug deeper into his employer. The trail was ghostly, but it led not to a black market collector, but to a shell corporation, and then to another all tenuously linked to new genetic research facilities on the edge of Velen space. Facilities rumored to be pushing the boundaries of psychic amplification and weaponization. Then Lyra made a discovery. While helping to calibrate the ship's sensitive long-range scanners, she picked up a faint, encrypted data stream being broadcast from the memory core itself. It wasn't just archival. It was a beacon, and it had been active since the crash. "He's been tracking us," Lyra said, her voice barely a whisper. "Tyrus or your employer, or both. The core is the leash. The sanctuary of the Rust Belt was an illusion. They were sitting ducks." Kalen felt the walls of his carefully constructed plan closing in. The money for Maya was on one side. On the other was Lyra's life and a growing, terrible suspicion that the cure he was buying might be funded by the same evil that sought to enslave her. One night, a proximity alarm blared. A ship, sleek and unmarked, was drifting into the debris field, scanning, hunting. They powered down everything, sitting in the cold, breathless dark of the station. Kalen had a pulse pistol in his hand. Lyra's hand found his in the darkness, her touch cool. Her empathy washed over him, not as an invasion, but as a shield, a projection of calm, of shared strength. In that moment, the gulf between human and alien vanished. They were just two souls adrift and hunted. The ship passed, but the message was clear. Time had run out. Kalen faced an impossible choice. Run to his buyer with the core and secure Maya's future, or destroy the beacon and try to save Lyra, forfeiting everything. As he looked at Lyra, who had placed her trust in a desperate thief, he saw the ghost of his daughter's future if he failed. He also saw the person Lyra could be if she lived. The weight of it was a planet on his chest. The decision was made for him. They were preparing the patched-together ship, the Wayfarer, for its desperate leap, when the attack came. Not from the void, but from within. The station's compromised airlock, which Kalen had deemed secure, hissed open. Not with enforcers, but with three figures in matte black combat suits. movements eerily silent and synchronized. They were mercenaries, professional and efficient. Kalen shoved Lyra behind a bulkhead, firing his pulse pistol. The bolt sizzled against energy shields. He was a brawler, not a soldier. A searing blast caught his shoulder, spinning him around. He fell, the world graying at the edges. Through the pain, he saw the lead mercenary stride toward Lyra, who stood defiant, a hydrospanner held like a club in her shaking hands. The mercenary didn't shoot. He raised a neural disruptor set to stun. "The Scion wants her undamaged," a voice synthesized and cold stated. "Sion Tyrus," but then a new voice, smooth, cultured, and dripping with malice, echoed from the mercenary's external speaker. "Actually, bring them both. The asset and the thief. The buyer has revised the terms of delivery." Kalen knew that voice. It was the intermediary, the one who'd hired him. The mercenary knocked the tool from Lyra's hand and clamped a restraint on her wrist. As Kalen struggled to rise, a boot connected with his ribs. He gasped, the memory core tumbling from his torn pocket, clattering to the deck, its light blazing. The smooth voice chuckled. "Ah, the core of Leora. And you, Mr. Kalen, have been such a diligent mule. You even kept it safe from the unfortunate Scion's overzealous pursuit. My employer will be pleased." They were dragged aboard the mercenary's cutter, a fast, brutal ship. Thrown into a holding cell, the door sealed with a final thud. Lyra tended to his wounded shoulder, her hands glowing faintly with a gentle, healing bioluminescence, a minor Velen trait. She explained, now drained from exertion and fear. "I'm sorry," Kalen rasped, the taste of copper and failure in his mouth. "I led them right to you." "No," Lyra said, her eyes filled with a terrible understanding. "We were always the destination." The ship docked not at a seedy outpost, but at a pristine, hidden orbital facility that gleamed with sterile surgical light. They were taken, under heavy guard, to an observation room overlooking a vast laboratory. In the lab below, Velen biological matter floated in suspension tanks. Psychic wave amplifiers hummed, and there, studying a holographic schematic, was the man with the smooth voice. He was human. Dr. Eris Thorne, a name Kalen recognized from faded news feeds, a brilliant, disgraced xenogeneticist who had vanished years ago, after illegal experimentation. He turned, a smile on his sharp, intelligent face. "Mr. Kalen." "And the lovely Lyra of House Vela, welcome." His gaze fell hungrily on the core, now held by a guard. "You have delivered the final piece." "The cure for my daughter?" Kalen demanded, fury cutting through his pain. "You promised, and you shall have it." Thorne spread his hands magnanimously. "The most advanced gene therapy suite on Centauri Prime is on standby, funded by me. Your Maya will bloom like a flower." His smile turned icy. "Once you fulfill the complete contract." He gestured to the lab, the core of Queen. Leora contains the perfected empathic engrams of the last great Velen monarch. The Scion Tyrus wanted it for prestige, for purity. A child's dream. I want its architecture. The key to synthesizing a controllable, amplified psychic wave. He turned to Lyra, his eyes clinical. "And you, my dear, are the perfect catalyst. Your specific, potent, empathic lineage, when subjected to the resonance of the Queen's core, will create a feedback loop. We can map it, replicate it, not to breed a purer Velen race, but to create one. An empathic core. Perfect soldiers. Perfect interrogators. A telepathic army, grown in tanks, loyal only to the highest bidder." The twist was a vice on Kalen's heart. He hadn't just been stealing a relic. He'd been procuring a component for a weapon of mass subjugation. His daughter's life was to be bought with the enslavement of an entire species' essence. "And if I refuse?" Kalen growled. Thorne sighed, as if dealing with a slow child. "Then the funding for Centauri Prime vanishes. And your daughter's stasis pod. Well, Earth's power grids are so notoriously unreliable." He leaned forward. "But cooperate? Ensure Lyra's participation. Maya gets her cure. You get a new life. And I get a new paradigm of warfare. Everyone wins." He looked at Lyra. "The Scion's men are still looking for you. I can give you to them, to be a broodmare for his petty crusade, or you can be the mother of a new era of power. Your choice." The guards shoved Kalen and Lyra into a single, comfortable but secure room. The door locked. The weight of the choice was crushing. On one screen, Thorne had displayed a live feed of a serene medical bay on Centauri Prime, an empty pod waiting. On another, Schematics of the empathic amplifiers pulsed. Lyra sat on the edge of a bunk, her glow dimmed. "You must do it," she said, her voice terribly calm. "You must let him use me. For your daughter." Kalen looked from the screen with the empty pod to the alien girl, who had shown him more kindness in days than he'd known in years. He saw Lyra's face. He heard Maya's laugh. He felt the ghost of Lyra's empathic touch in the dark. "No," he said, the word leaving him like a stone dropping into a still pool. "He doesn't get to win. He doesn't get to make me that man." The father in him warred with the man he thought he'd become. The thief, the survivor, was gone. In his place was something older, more fundamental. A protector. "We're getting out of here. Both of us." The plan was insanity, but it was theirs. Lyra, drawing on a deep well of strength, explained that the Velen empathic connection was a two-way stream. Thorn saw her as a receiver, a catalyst, but a strong will could be a transmitter, a disruptor. "The core," she said. "Its song is sorrow, but sorrow is a powerful, chaotic frequency. If I can channel it, focus it not to amplify, but to overload, I could disrupt the neural implants of the guards, the lab systems. But I need to be close to the core, and I need an anchor, a steady emotional frequency to ground me. Without it, the feedback could shatter my own mind." She looked at Kalen. "Your love for Maya. It is the purest, strongest signal I have ever felt. Not a lament of the past, but a hope for the future, a fixed point. Can you hold it?
Can you think of her, only of her, and let me
borrow its strength?" It was a psychic intimacy far beyond anything he'd imagined. To open his deepest heart, his rawest hope to another being, he thought of the risk to her mind. He thought of Maya, frozen and waiting. He nodded. "What do I do?" "Just love her," Lyra said softly. "And trust me." Their opportunity came during a conditioning session, where Thorn brought the core into their room to begin acclimating Lyra to its resonance. 2 guards were present. Thorn, arrogant in his control, placed the core on a pedestal. It glowed, filling the room with a haunting, beautiful melody only Lyra and, faintly, Kalen could perceive. As Thorn began his spiel about synergy, Lyra closed her eyes. Kalen stood beside her, ignoring the pain in his shoulder. He closed his own eyes. He didn't think of the plan, the danger, the ship. He thought of Maya. The day she was born, a tiny fist closing around his finger, her first steps wobbling into his arms, the way she had mispronounced constellation as starrelation, the sound of her breathing, steady and trusting as he read her to sleep, the crushing void of her absence, the desperate, unwavering hope that he would see her eyes open again, see them light up with recognition. He built a fortress in his mind, not of steel, but of these moments, a lighthouse beam of pure paternal love. He felt Lyra's presence then, not as an intrusion, but as a warmth joining him at the lighthouse. She saw his memories, felt his love, and she wove it into her own being, using it as a foundation. Then she turned her focus to the core's song of sorrow. She didn't fight it. She embraced it, let it fill her, and then, using the stability of Kalen's love as a conduit, she pushed. A wave of visible distortion pulsed from Lyra. The guards cried out, clawing at their helmets as their implant HUDs became a storm of static and agony. The lights flickered wildly. Thorn stumbled back, his face a mask of shock. "Impossible. The dampeners." Lyra's nose bled luminous blue. She was shaking, but she held the connection. Kalen, his mind one single resonant note of Maya, reached out. He grabbed the core from the pedestal. It was scalding hot now, vibrating with power. He hurled it not at Thorn, but at the main observation window overlooking the lab. The core struck the transparent alloy. For a second, nothing happened. Then a web of cracks lit from within by the core's raging energy, spiderwebbed across the surface. With a sound like a dying chime, the window and the core exploded outward into the lab below. Chaos decompression alarms screamed. Atmosphere roared out into the lab, scattering equipment. Kalen grabbed the staggering Lyra. One guard was down, the other disoriented. They ran. The facility was in pandemonium. They moved through corridors filled with rushing personnel and blaring warnings. It was a race against lockdown. Kalen's knowledge of ship layouts guided them toward a docking umbilical. They found a small courier ship, its hatch open in the emergency. As they scrambled inside, Thorn's voice, furious and shrill, echoed over the comms. "You think you've won? You've doomed your child, Kalen. And you little witch, you've burned out your gift. You're nothing now." Lyra collapsed into the co-pilot's seat. Her glow almost extinguished, her face pale and drawn. She gave Kalen a weak, triumphant smile. The anchor held. Kalen fired up the engines, ignoring the facility's commands to stand down. He punched the thrusters, tearing the ship free from the umbilical. Alerts lit up, weapons lock. Thorne's facility had defenses. He flew not with a pilot's grace, but with a father's desperation. He jinked and weaved through the debris of the Rust Belt. The larger facility's plasma cannons lighting up the dark around them. A near miss shook the ship, sending warning klaxons blaring. In that cockpit, surrounded by danger, Kalen looked at Lyra, the empathic girl who had sacrificed her birthright, her very psychic strength to save herself and help him. She was broken, exhausted, but free. He reached over, taking her hand. No empathic jolt this time, just the cold physical touch. But the understanding between them was deeper than any psychic link. It was forged in shared sacrifice. "I'm getting you home," he promised, though he had no idea how. "Home," she repeated, the word tasting strange. Then she pointed at the scanner. "The Wayfarer, our ship. It's still out there, drifting. If we can reach it." It was a sliver of hope. Kalen pushed the stolen courier to its limits, weaving a desperate course back to the derelict station, the facility's guns still searching for them. They reached the Wayfarer, but Thorne's vengeance followed. The mercenary cutter, the one that had captured them, dropped out of a micro-jump, blocking their path. At the same time, on another scanner frequency, a new official Velen vessel emerged, elegant, armed, and broadcasting the seal of House Tyrus. He had tracked the Corps' final, catastrophic signal. They were trapped between two hells. The mercenaries, acting on Thorne's fury, and Tyrus, seeking to reclaim his property and avenge the destroyed relic. "Dock with the Wayfarer," Lyra urged. "Its drive is patched. We can jump." The courier shuddered as mercenary plasma fire scorched its shields. Kalen executed a reckless spinning maneuver, aligning the airlocks. Magnetic clamps engaged with a groan. They scrambled through the tunnel into the familiar, grimy interior of the Wayfarer. "Go," Lyra yelled, heading for the engineering station to route. All power to the makeshift jump drive. Kalen slid into the pilot's chair. The Wayfarer was a junk heap, but its heart, a refurbished quantum drive core, was strong. He brought it online. The ship thrummed like a waking beast. "The Velen ship is hailing," Lyra reported, her voice tense. "It's Tyrus. He's demanding my surrender. He says he can protect me from the human criminals." On screen, Tyrus's handsome, severe face appeared. "Lyra, this folly ends now. Return to me. Your family's honor depends on it." Lyra stared at his image, her face a canvas of pain and defiance. "My honor depends on never seeing you again, Tyrus." She cut the channel. The mercenary cutter opened fire in earnest. The Wayfarer's shields, never meant for combat, flared and failed. Alarms screamed as hull breaches blossomed on the starboard side. Atmosphere vented. The jump drive spooled, but too slowly. "We need more time," Kalen shouted, fighting the crippled ship's controls. Lyra looked from the engineering readout to the viewport, where the Velen ship was moving into a position to tractor them. Then she looked at Kalen, a final, peaceful resolve in her eyes. "You gave me an anchor," she said. "Now I give you a distraction." Before he could stop her, she accessed the comms. She broadcast on all frequencies a raw, open transmission aimed directly at the Velen ship and any other vessel in the sector. "This is Lyra of House Vela. I bear witness against Scion Tyrus of House Keller. He conspires to pervert our empathic gifts to enslave our lineage for a purge. He allied with the human rogue Thorne, seeking the core of Leora not for reverence but for weaponry. I submit my memories, my testimony to the public channel. Judge him." On the screen, Tyrus's face went from stern to horrified. Lyra wasn't just refusing. She was burning his reputation, his house, his entire future to the ground in a galactic instant. The scandal would be monumental. The Velen ship wavered, its weapons powering down momentarily as internal crisis undoubtedly erupted. But the mercenary cutter, with no political stakes, pressed the attack. A final, sustained blast ripped through the Wayfarer's engineering section. Concussion threw Kalen from his chair. Lyra was flung against a console, slumping to the floor, unmoving. The jump drive alarm switched from spooling to a critical overheating whine. They were dead in the water, about to be boarded by mercenaries or captured by a vengeful Tyrus. Crawling through sparking wreckage, Kalen reached Lyra. She was breathing but unconscious. He dragged her back to the pilot's chair. The drive was failing, but it had built up a partial charge. A jump now would be suicidal, a short random leap with no calculations. It could strand them in deep space or tear the ship apart. He looked at Lyra's still face. He looked at the hologram of Maya, still flickering on a cracked panel. He thought of Thorn's promise, now ash. He thought of the anchor he'd been. With a roar of defiance, not of a thief, but of a father, he slammed his hand onto the emergency jump initiator. "For both of you," he whispered. Space outside the viewport twisted, stretched and shattered into the blinding, chaotic stream of unguided faster-than-light travel. The Wayfarer screamed in protest, its hull groaning, its frame threatening to disintegrate. Then with a final gut-wrenching lurch, it fell back into normal space. Silence, terrible, absolute silence, broken only by the crackle of dying electronics and the hiss of escaping air. Kalen woke to soft golden light, not the sterile glow of Vega Prime or the cold stars of the void, but the warm, gentle light of a real sun. He was in a clean medbay bed, his shoulder bandaged. For a terrifying moment, he thought he was back in Thorn's facility. Then he saw her, Lyra, sitting in a chair beside him, her opalescent skin healed, though her luminous eyes held a new, quiet depth. She was wearing simple, human-style clothing, and she was smiling. "Where?" he croaked. "Centauri Prime," she said, her voice warm. "The jump." It was a 1 in a billion shot. It spat us out on the edge of this system, right in the path of a patrol cruiser. Our distress beacon and my public broadcast had already reached here. Tyrus's house is in disarray. Thorn's facility has been raided by intersystem authorities. The scandal is galactic. She placed a hand over his. "You did it, Kalen." He couldn't form the question. The hope was too vast, too fragile. Lyra understood. She nodded toward the viewing window. Outside, in a sun-dappled courtyard of the medical complex, a young girl with dark hair was sitting with a caretaker, looking up at a tree with genuine, curious wonder. She was thin, pale from years of stasis, but alive, awake. Maya. Tears he didn't know he had left streamed down Kalen's face. The medical fees, the cure, all covered by the Centauri Prime government. Part of the settlement for Lyra's asylum and testimony, and as recognition for exposing a galactic conspiracy. Later, he stood in that courtyard, holding his daughter for the first time in 5 years. She was shy, confused by the years lost, but she nestled into his embrace, a primal recognition there. Over her head, he looked at Lyra, who watched them with a soft, contented expression. She had no family to return to, not after defying tradition and sparking a civil conflict on Vega Prime. Her empathic gift was diminished, a casualty of her sacrifice, but not gone. She said it felt cleaner now, quieter, truly her own. "What will you do?" Kalen asked her. Lyra looked at Maya, then at the vast sky of this new world. "The universe is wide, and I find I have a fondness for salvage." A faint, familiar glow returned to her eyes, not of aristocracy, but of hard-won freedom. Perhaps this crew could use a first mate with a unique perspective. Maya looked up at the strange, beautiful woman, then at her father. A small, trusting smile touched her lips. Kalen put an arm around his daughter and nodded to his friend. The future was uncertain. Thorn was in custody, but his backers were still out there. Tyrus's faction was wounded, not dead. The memory of the Corps' song was a permanent echo in his soul. But for now, under an alien son, a human father, his healed daughter, and an alien girl who had lost one world and found another, stood together. They were not a family born of blood, but of sacrifice, anchored by a love that had defied the cold calculus of the universe. Their story was just one jump away from beginning anew, and in the silent depths of space, on the encrypted fragments of Thorn's recovered data core, a single troubling file remained, labeled not with a name but a coordinate, a location, whispering of something older than Queens, deeper than memory, waiting to be found.